I'm also a member of the Becasim project, and I'm specifically interested in the stochastic things. Well, precisely interaction of stochastic fluctuations or fluctuations that you may model with random or stochastic terms with dispersion and linearity and things like that. So here in this context, I will be interested in a case, so Bose-Einstein condensates, in which you have fluctuations, for example, fluctuations of your confining systems of your lasers that are modeled by stochastic terms, or another, so this is the inhomogeneities I will consider. Or another situation is the case where you take into account the effect of the temperature. That is, your condensate is not close to zero. The temperature of your condensate is not close to zero, but it's more close to the critical temperature. Okay, so these are, this talk will be a kind of review of the result we had on these topics. And these are joint works with several people. So my main collaborator on the subject is Reika Fukuizumi from Tohoku University. I've been working on that with her for quite a few years now. For the last part of the talk, this is a joint work with also Arnaud Debuche, who is from Rennes. And also some of the work is joint with Romain Poncet, who is here, and who is doing his PhD with me at the CIMAP. And so he's responsible for all the numerical simulations that I will show you. So you should ask Romain if you complain about the simulations. Okay, so I will not say much about the context, because I guess that you already had a few talks about the topic, so I'm sorry I could only arrive now, so I missed a few, but I guess that most of you are much more specialist of the subject than I am. The only thing I would say is that, so we consider a gas of boson in which we will take this macroscopic wave function, which is the same for all particles, and we consider the case where we have a large number of atoms, and we take the mean field approximations so that our basic model will be the Gross-Pitaevsky equation that you've seen several times already. So, here, V will be the confining potential that will be subject in the next slide to fluctuations. And so A is the S-wave scattering length that can be positive or negative, so I will consider both cases. In some cases, we will have attractive condensates, and in the last part of the talk, it will be more repulsive. So, as I said before, my aim is to take into account some stochastic aspects, some stochastic fluctuations in the dynamics. And so there are two sources of fluctuations that are found in the physics literature. And so my aim is to study the influence that this has on the models and how you treat the new models mathematically and what does it change in the dynamics from a mathematical point of view in the models. So there are two situations that I will consider, as I said before. So the first one will be the fluctuation of the laser parameters of the optical confinement. So that will lead to fluctuating confining potential V. And the second case, so the last part of the talk, which is a more recent work, is the case where we add in our model the influence of the temperature, which implies that we take into account the interaction with the thermal cloud. And so we were based on a paper that appeared in 2008 in Nature. This paper was brought to my attention by Michikazu Kobayashi, who is here, so I thank him for that. And so this model is called the projective stochastic Gross-Pitayevsky equation. Okay, so first, let me talk about the random variation of the confining potential. Okay, so I write the, so here, again, the Gross-Pitayevsky equation. So in this case, so this is a model which was already studied in the beginning of the 2000 years in these two papers in particular. So in the case where you have a confining potential, so which is typically harmonic potential, so I take him isotropic, but you could suppose that it's not isotropic, that is not very important actually. And this fluctuates with time, and only with time actually, as time evolves. This, so the trap frequency fluctuates, and so it's no more constant, and we model this by the addition of this extra term here, psi of t, which is taken here in those, well, not exactly like this in the second paper, but I will explain this a little bit more after. So typically, psi of t is, so it's here for modeling the noise. So it's a delta correlated Gaussian process. So zero mean and delta correlated. So it's a white noise, typically, white noise in time. So it's not completely necessary to take these white noise assumptions. That is the fact. White noise means that the correlation length in time is exactly equal to 0. It's not necessary to assume that. Actually, you could have considered a more general stationary process with correlation functions that decay sufficiently fast as t minus t prime is large. That you can find some models like this also in the physics literature. It's not really a problem actually, because from a mathematical point of view in general, so this kind of terms is less problematic than the white noise. You cannot say as much as with the white noise on the dynamics, but in any case, when the white noise is quite a natural assumption, if you have some specific scale in your system. That is typically if the correlation length of the noise is much smaller than the deterministic typical length. And I will say a little bit more. We have a mathematical result which really says that, actually. So in the two papers that I mentioned before, what was done is in the first one, some moments methods were used. So it was in the case where so I changed in my notation, I didn't say, but I put a G here for this interaction coefficient, which can be positive or negative depending on the sign of your S-wave scattering length, actually. So if G is negative, what the motivation of Abdullayev and the quarters was to determine whether in an attractive condensate there could be collapse of the condensate or not. So they tried to see whether they could have some closed equations on the moments to determine whether there would be collapse or not. They did not have actually a precise answer to the question, but they tried to. And in the second paper by Garnier and co-authors, some variational methods were used, that is, or what you call sometimes maybe collective coordinate methods. That is, the solution was decomposed as a Gaussian profiles with some modulation parameters, a finite number of modulation parameters, and some asymptotic analysis was used together with numerical simulations to try to see whether you can have something about the density of the collapse time, and also the collapse time as a function of the power of what he calls the power, which is actually the number of atoms or the squared L2 norm for the mathematicians. So these are the numerical simulations you can find in a paper by Garnier. So on the left, you have the histograms of the collapse time, but only with 1,000 simulations, which is not much, actually, to really have those curves. And on the right, what you can see is a comparison between the ODE, which is the system you find when you consider that your solution is you make some ansatz about these Gaussian profiles and a finite number of modulation parameters and the full PD. And you see that, and so here it's this, so the two curves represent the mean collapse time with respect, so above it's with respect to the square delta norm, the power, and below it's with respect to the strength of the noise. So you see that when the power is large, so the collapse time is typically small, there's a quite good agreement, but when the power reaches the critical value below which there is no collapse typically, there is a large disagreement between the two models, you can see here. And the same with the strength of the noise. When the noise is small, then you don't have a very good agreement. The P here is close to the critical P. Okay, so now let's turn to the mathematical results about this model. So what can we say? So first, I write the equation in a mathematical way. So I put all the constants equal to 1. So I'm not in the semi-classical limit here because I put everything equal to 1. So there is no small constant here. The small constant when there will be 1 will be in the noise, actually, in front of the noise. So you see, so you still have, so you can divide everything by dt. This is just a notation. You can divide everything by dt. You still have your Grotz-Pitaevsky, standard Grotz-Pitaevsky equation here. And on the right-hand side, you have the part with the noise. So it's the confining potential multiplied by psi, the solution, multiplies by dW by dt, which is my previous psi. That is dW by dt is the white noise, which means that W is the antiderivative of the white noise. That is a Brownian motion. Right? It's real valued here. So actually, from a mathematical point of view, this equation is not very good because you put your noise at a level in the equation which is quite at the level of the linear operator, which is quite bad. But what is nice is that the noise only depends on time. And in this case, we can actually use the Gauss transform to get from this equation, so the full equation with the nonlinearity, to a new equation in U, which is actually something which looks like a nonlinear Schrödinger equation with a random magnetic field here. You have this, this you can see as a magnetic vector potential, which is linear in X, and which is something which implies the Brownian motion here. So using this, it's not very difficult actually to deal with the equation and to show that you have more or less the same result as what you have for the standard nonlinear Schrödinger equation. That is in dimension 1, everything is nice. So you have a nice global solution in L2 that is square integrable, which is unique. And if the initial state is more regular than L2, then you will propagate the regularity. But in dimension 2 or 3, because the equation is has a cubic nonlinearity, so what I call sigma is the energy space. I will write it more precisely after. Then if your initial state is in sigma, you have a local existence result only, a priori. And then to get global existence, you use the energy, which I've written here. So this is the energy, or the Hamiltonian, well, I called it H. So for the deterministic equation, but because we've had some noise in the equation, of course this is not preserved by the stochastic equation, because when we had noise, we had energy in the system, and the energy is not preserved, it grows typically. But we can compute the evolution of the energy thanks to a very useful identity, which is the Ito formula. And it gives the evolution of the energy in this way. So you have two extra terms compared to the deterministic case where it's conserved. You have this term, which is a stochastic term, which typically has 0 mean. So in mean, this is 0. This is just the fluctuation term. And you have this other term, which is typically growing linearly in T. And you can also compute the evolution of the mean square width, x psi L2 squared. And using this, you can show actually that the solution exists for all time if the interaction constant is positive. But if it is negative, you can really show that there is collapse of the condensate, actually. Exactly as you would do. Well, it's not exactly as, because it's a little bit more complicated due to the evolution of the energy, but it's the same kind of tricks as in the deterministic case for the nonlinear Schrödinger equation. We can also prove diffusion approximation result. That is what I've mentioned at the beginning, that you do not necessarily have exactly white noise in your system. You can have a noise which is not white, but which has a small correlation length. And if you replace in your equation this noise term, so which was modeled by dW here, so you divide everything by dt, and here you put a term which is m of t over epsilon square times 1 over epsilon. Where M is some stationary ergodic process which satisfies some mixing conditions. I do not exactly explain what it means. It means typically that for if T is far from T prime, then typically M of T will be almost decorrelated from M T prime. This is what it means. In this case, you can prove that as epsilon goes to 0, the solution of this equation will converge to the solution of the stochastic equation with really the white noise here. So in some sense, this is a justification of the fact that you will use your equation with white noise even if your correlation length is not 0, but it's small compared to the deterministic characteristic length. Okay, next. What time did I start?
It's written here. 15 minutes.
Il reste?
Yeah.
Ok.
20 minutes.
Il me reste?
Ouais.
D'accord. Okay. So next, we want to study what happens to the vortices. So you know that usually in most cases, one point of interest in the condensates is that the fact that the condensate can, singularities can form in the condensate. And so what happens if you take account of the inhomogeneity to these singularities? So it's a very difficult question, actually, because studying this from a mathematical point of view is very complicated. So we were restricted to a very, very simple case, the case where you consider only vortices which are centered at 0, and with a symmetry, which were symmetric around the origin. That is, I consider, in some sense, vortices in my Gross-Pitaevsky equation. So these are special solutions of the equation without the noise, which are standing waves, and which are periodic solutions, and which can decompose like this, where r, theta are the polar coordinates. So typically it depends on, so the amplitude necessarily vanishes at 0, but the phase varies from 0 to 2m pi as you make one turn around the origin, typically. So m is fixed. And such a solution will exist if your chemical potential, so mu, is larger than lambda m, which is 2m plus 2, which is the first eigenvalue of the linear operator in some space that I will introduce, or maybe not, which is typically the space where you have this equivariance symmetry. So the question was, if I consider my stochastic equation with a small noise, so I put a small constant in front of the noise here, a small epsilon, and I start from one of these solutions with a m fixed, can I write the solution of this equation? What can I say about the behavior of my solution of the stochastic equation for small epsilon and for t naught too large. So the first remark is that actually this M equivariant symmetry, the fact that you can write your solution in this way. So I recall that. So here, two things I did not say which are important is the fact first that the constant J is positive, and we are in dimension 2. It is really specific to the two-dimensional case. And so as I said, the M equivariance is preserved by the noise. So it means that if you start from an initial state which is like this, then for all time the solution can also be written in this way. And we will write it. We write our solution like this. So we decompose the radial part in this times this, where this is the solution, the periodic solution of the deterministic equation, the standing wave, and this is the remaining part. So there is not a unique way of writing the solution like this, but we choose the way of doing it such that the remaining part is as small as possible. And this gives a condition actually on this modulation parameter psi epsilon of t, which is now random, of course, because our equation is a stochastic equation. And we are interested in particular in this random parameter. So the first question is, can we estimate the time tau for which we can write things like this? So you may see this like this. You have a periodic orbit. You start from a point on this periodic orbit, so your solution evolves, and at some times you will leave the neighborhood, which is a fixed neighborhood of size alpha. And you can actually prove that this E here, sorry, means expectation, so it's the mean. You can prove that the mean of the exit time is necessarily finite, which means that almost surely your exit time will be finite. And you can prove that the probability that this exit time is less than C can be estimated from above by this kind of constant. So what does it mean? It means that you will be close to this up to times which are small compared to epsilon to the power minus 2. Okay. We also have a central limit theorem, which tells a little bit more about the remaining part and the modulation parameters. So I skip this because this is a little bit technical. So this gives the evolution of the modulation parameters, so the random phase of the solution, the best approximation of the phase of the solution in some sense, up to order 1. So you have an exact expression, and you see that, of course, the first term is mu, because as epsilon goes to 0, your solution goes to the deterministic solution, which is nothing but I to the I mu t times. So the phase converges, the random modulation parameters converges to mu, but the first order is nothing but a Brownian motion in some sense. This is what it says. Okay, so I'll show you a few numerical results before going to the second part. So the schemes that Romain's used is Crank-Nicolson scheme for the linear terms, taking account of the symmetries here, so which was derived from a paper by Baoandu. The relaxation for the nonlinear terms, so the scheme which was introduced by Christophe Besse. And for the noise, we have no choice. We necessarily have to use midpoint discretization because this is a natural way of discretizing a noise, which is an approximation of small correlation n, but not 0. You necessarily have to do that. Otherwise, this is not the right solution that you approximate. Okay, so this is the profile of the deterministic solution. This was computation from the exact solution of the modulation parameters, and the remaining part, which have been compared to the expression that we had, with good agreement. And so the estimate we had on the exit time was only a bound from above. So the aim of the numerical simulations was to check that these bounds were optimal. And this is actually the case, because you see, so this was done using a Monte Carlo simulation. And you see that you have the right rate. So this is the exit time in log scale with respect to t and with respect to epsilon. So with respect to epsilon here and with respect to t here, and we have, at least for epsilon sufficiently small, we have the right scales. Okay. So for epsilon really small, it was a hard task, because the fact that you exit from your neighborhood is a rare event, so you have to use really specific methods for that. Okay, these are simulations of one trajectory, so one realization of the noise. So this is in log scale, and what you see here is the radius. So the solution is symmetric, is radially symmetric. So here you have the radius, and here you have the time. So you see that it's fluctuating almost periodically. So you have something which is a random perturbation of something which looks periodic. This is with a higher m, and again a higher m equal 2. And this is with epsilon equals 0. So this is the deterministic solution, but here you perturb, of course, you perturb the initial data, because otherwise you will be constant. You will be, the modulus will be constant. Of course, this is the modulus of the solution. And you see, the solution is exactly periodic in this case. Well, actually, I do not know any mathematical result which says that there is such a periodic solution in the deterministic case. So it would be helpful for us, because we could try to do some procedure to try to see what would be more precisely the random solution in this case. And this is with the higher epsilon, and here you see that something happens if you increase the strength of the noise, but of course our estimates cannot go up to this point from now. Okay, so now I turn to the second part, which is the finite temperature model. So I guess I still have 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
No, 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so
Even more.
I think it will more or less be sufficient. Okay, so as I said before, we started from a paper by Weiler, Neely Scherer, Bailey Davis in Nature in 2008. And so what I understood of the paper is that they tried to, well, first there was a part which was experimental in the paper. So using rubidium atoms, they start an evaporating cooling process to get the atoms to a temperature which was close to the critical point. And then they relaxed the trap frequencies, and what they observed was a phase transition. And in particular, what they observed was the formation of singularities, that is, vortices in the condensate. And they tried to do simulations that could reproduce this phenomenon. And the simulations were done like this, so they used the stochastic projecting the GP equation that I will write in the next slide. I will show you in the next slide. They start, so this depends on the model depends on the temperature, of course. So they start with a temperature, initial temperature, which is above the critical point, and a chemical potential, which is mu I, which is fixed. And they let the system, they let the solution evolve up to its equilibrium state, which there is an equilibrium state in this model. And then, after, when the system is close to equilibrium, they change the temperature to a finite temperature, which is below the critical temperature, and a larger chemical potential. And then they see the spontaneous formation of vortices. And so this is the model. So what is different compared to the standard Ross-Pitayevsky equation So this is the operator, nonlinear operator, which corresponds to the Gross-Pitayevsky equation. Okay, so that means the Gross-Pitayevsky is the equation d psi equals minus a over h LGP psi dt. This is the standard Gross-Pitayevsky. And you add here another part which so this is in some sense a Hamiltonian evolution. And you had in your equation the corresponding part which corresponds to the gradient flow with the same energy potential, or whatever you call it, Hamiltonian. That is, this is a dissipation term, right? Because you don't have an I. And you add noise, which is a space-time white noise, delta correlated both in time and space. Okay, with a chemical potential that you could add also here, because this is just a Schendorf gauge. But you also had another term, which is a cutoff. That is, you project your whole system on the low energy modes. You only keep the first mode. And so these additional terms are really here to model the interaction of the thermal cloud, the condensate with the thermal cloud. So what about the equilibrium state? So I wrote here the Hamiltonian or energy of the system. We're adding the chemical potential here. And this is the V of X is still the confining potential. So what happens? At zero temperature, so your system will have a tendency to go to the minimum of the H, or at least some stationary, some critical point of H. But the minimum of H, how is it? You see that it depends on mu. If mu is small, the minimum is just 0. And if mu crosses this value here, and then you have a symmetry breaking. Now, when T is positive, you have a Gibbs measure. So, of course, for small t, the Gibbs measure concentrates into the minima of this H here. And the Gibbs measure has this expression because the dimension, I recall, is finite because we have projected on the first modes in the equation. And so here you just put the d psi c means the Lebesgue measure in dimension dc, right? So you have this standard. So it's known from a mathematical point of view that for this system you have a convergence to equilibrium with geometric rates, because quite classical system in finite dimension. So you may see that first you have to recall that psi is complex valued, of course, that here you have a S1 symmetry in your energy or potential. So typically, these are the typical sections you have for H. So, H, I mean, you must see it as a complex valued, right? So it's symmetric with respect to, how to say? So there is a S1 symmetry, but you have this typical cross section when you fix the angle. So first I will show you the experiment, the numerical the reproduction in some sense of the numerical experiment that was done by Romain. So what is plotted here is the values of the wave function, of the modulus of the wave function. And so the system evolves, and you can see the formation of the line, the vortex line here. So of course, if you let the system evolve again, so finally it will reach the equilibrium point. Sorry. And okay. So now what I want to say is what we studied actually. So Romain is now trying to get some really, how to say, efficient simulation in order to be able to do some Monte Carlo methods on this model more precisely, using some improvements of really numerical methods for this kind of system. Now, what about the infinite dimensional model? So if we get rid of the projection I had before on the model, what can we say? So this question can be, so of course it's in some sense artificial because in the physical model it's quite natural to use this projection. But if you have to use it with a large number of modes, it's natural that you look at what happens if the number of modes is infinite in order to understand the model. And actually, we can say something, but only for the moment in dimension 1 in X. The reason is that the space-time white noise is really awful, and it's not so awful in a 1D case. That is, you can still make sense of the solution of this equation in a 1D case. You cannot in 2D or 3D, but there is some hope. But for the moment, we can't. Okay, so in this case, so we have this infinite dimensional, so I got rid of the projection. And so I have exactly the same model as before, but without projection. And the question is, can we still make sense of the Gibbs measure, and can we still have convergence to equilibrium? And the answer is yes, of course. So how do we make sense of the Gibbs measure? So the trick is to use a complete orthonormal system of L2, space L2, which made of the eigenmodes of this operator, the harmonic operator. And then we can write the space-time, well, the antiderivative in time of the space-time white noise. You can write it like this. So in some sense, it's infinite dimensional Brownian motion. Right? So it's a sum of these eigenmodes multiplied by some Brownian motion. All the family of beta k is independent, of course. So first we consider the case, which were more easy, where the chemical potential is less than the first eigenvalue. That is, the minimum is 0 for our potential. Then in this case, you can actually make sense of the Gibbs measures. That was done by Bergtoman and Zvetkov in 2013. And the way you do this is you can write, so you still use this Hn, which are the eigenmodes of this operator, and you put in front of Hn, so you construct this series where Gn is a family of complex valued Gaussian random variables, n 0, 1, and lambda n is the previous eigenvalues, the square root of the previous eigenvalues. Then this gives you a Gaussian measure on the infinite dimensional space. And what you can prove, which is, so it's Gaussian, and it's constructed thanks to the Hn, the eigenmodes of the previous operator. What you can prove, what they proved, is that this, the measure that you get, that is the law of this random variable, is supported in LP for p larger than 4. That is, the measure of L2 is 0. And that is not very good because L2 is our basic space. So it makes things complicated, but it's good in some sense because then you can write your Gibbs measure, your natural Gibbs measure, as something which is well defined on L4, which is this term which comes from the part of order 4 in the energy, times this Gaussian random measure in infinite dimension. And because also you can prove that the solutions are locally well defined in L4, this is quite good. And actually this measure you can prove is really invariant for the evolution of your stochastic equation. So what we can prove on this is that using the construction of this measure is that we have global existence for almost all initial states. Almost all means almost all with respect to this measure pi, which is a measure on L4, as I said before. And we also have convergence to equilibrium in the sense of the mean, still with respect to pi, which is a kind of ergodic theorem in some sense. So this is what we have. And I guess because my time is over, so I just a few words of conclusion about this part. So as I said, Romain is now improving the numerical methods to get a simulation for for this system. Also, the question is, what about the chemical potential larger than 1, which is a more interesting case. Well, actually, we know now how to do that. So it's certainly true still, the convergence to equilibrium. We know, we just have to write the details. Okay, for more realistic space dimension, that is dimension 2 or 3, we would need refined methods. This is really a hard task because of this white noise problem. But there can be some hope, because now there are some studies which begins to make sense of such rough noise for solutions of this form. But we're still far from that, actually. And the last point is an interesting question to my point of view is, can we decompose the motion you have under this system as a slow-fast dynamics? Because you have this S1 symmetry of your potential, so what you would expect is have a slow motion on these ISO potential values, and a fast motion in a transverse direction, at least in a finite dimensional case. And I don't think this has really been done, at least in the mathematical community. I don't know if the physicists know that. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.
It's time for question, and I have the micro. Please use it. No. Yes.
So in your part 2, you study the random effect to quantize vortices with m, one number with m. I notice your
in
random, part 2, I think. You have you have vortices with one number m. You apply some random potential, which is Cossini times. Basically, your trapping potential is radio symmetric. Here, so your potential for the random part also radio symmetric. If that part is not radio symmetric in space.
So I'm not sure to understand. You're talking about this part?
No, next part. Oh, before.
Before, okay.
Okay, here. So if the last term you replace x squared by, for example, x squared plus 2y squared, what happens?
X squared plus 2i.
So here your last term is radio symmetric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if.
Anisotropic, you mean potential? That's what you mean?
Yeah, with the what is still stable or unstable?
Yeah, no, you can. You don't have to choose x squared. That is just for simplicity. But you can show anything which is quadratic in x will work. What you need really is to have the same, more or less. No, you don't even need to have the same potential on the right side and the left, actually. Or what you mean is that it's quadratic.
But do you need radio symmetric? Do you need the radio? Well, the left you must radio symmetric, right? Because what it states. But on the right, you need radio symmetric. Radio symmetric. Yeah. Because in this case, the angular momentum expectation is conserved. If the last term is not radio symmetric, the angular momentum expectation is no longer conserved during dynamics.
I'm not sure to.
The angular momentum expectation is no longer.
The equivariance will not be preserved. That's what you said. Okay.
Yeah. So that's
yes. Here, of course, for this, okay. There are two different things.
Yeah.
All what is concerned with existence result, this works still with a very general potential, right? Of course, this is very specific.
Yeah.
I agree. It's because, but even for the some sense for the deterministic solution, you need this symmetry. So,
so the trapping potential.
I guess you could, if you could design a noise that would preserve the symmetries you have in the deterministic equation. But I agree, this is very specific. You have very specific symmetries.
Okay, we'll see you later.
Yeah, so first maybe a short remark. So for your dimensions 2 and 3, where it's complicated with the white noise, I think it would be much easier if you take a convolution kernel instead of taking a power.
Yes, but you
you
wouldn't
still have to
have
renormalize, but
no, but of course, okay, of course you can smooth your noise. But if you smooth your
no, not
noise,
the noise, but the non-linearity.
but if you okay.
Okay, so it's
That's
still
true.
complicated. You still have to do something, but it's
Yeah.
much easier than 5 to the 4th.
That's true. So maybe yes, because you that's a good point actually. I didn't know. But the smoothing the noise you cannot because you lose you lose the Gibbs measure. That's
No,
for sure.
sure, yes. And then I had a real question. That was not really a question. For the first part, so what you do is you let the strength of the trap random. But what if now you make random the center of the trap? What's going on? Is it the same?
But then if the noise, well, that's if you have a specific term that just you have translation, which would be random, maybe you can say something. If you have a very general noise depending on space,
No, just
that's a mess. But this
random
idea,
translation.
maybe you can say, yeah, maybe you can do something.
With the
for
Gaussian,
sure, yeah.
maybe a natural.
That would be natural, yeah.
So this does not extend directly or want us to do everything again?
I guess so. For me, it's not. Maybe there is a kind of transformation you can make so that it's easy, but I did not look at that, so I cannot say like this. Sorry.
Thank you.
More question? So Anne, thanks again.